I worked as a devoted nurse for 37 years. Caring for others was my calling. My daughter-in-law is a nurse too, but unlike me, she has no interest in caring for an old mother-in-law, only in taking care of my money. And to get what she wants, there's nothing she wouldn't dare to do. You'll be shocked when you hear the cunning tricks she used, so stay with me till the end of this video. My dear listeners, where are you tuning in from? Leave me a comment below and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story so more people can hear what really happened. If you see me calm, it means I just survived a silent murder attempt. That was the first thought that crossed my mind as I sat by the kitchen window, watching the frost crawl over the glass. The Ohio wind outside was sharp enough to cut through bone, and the neighborhood lay still like it was holding its breath. The wall clock struck 11:45 p.m., its slow rhythm echoing through the empty house. The porch light flickered once, twice, then steadied, while the doorbell camera blinked its faint red glow like a tired eye that refused to sleep. I wrapped my shawl tighter and listened. Every sound mattered now. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, even the faint scrape from outside where the trash bins stood. People think aging means weakness, but I've learned it's the opposite. Calm is not surrender. Calm is a weapon. I didn't spend 37 years as a nurse without learning how to tell the difference between delusion and manipulation. You can always tell when someone's trying to poison your mind the same way they'd poison your body, slowly, drop by drop, until you start doubting your own senses. Tonight was one of those nights when doubt could kill you. It started about 3 weeks ago when Aurora suddenly became the most considerate daughter-in-law anyone could dream of. Every night, just before midnight, she'd smile and say, "Mother, you rest. Let me take out the trash." The first time I thought it was kindness. The second time, coincidence. But when it happened every single night at almost the same hour, I knew it was a pattern, not a favor. Aurora Blake was a nurse like me. She knew how to move quietly, how to handle people's trust like a scalpel. The kind of woman who said please while hiding her true intention behind it. That night I watched her from the upstairs window. She stepped into the yard wearing her slippers, moving light as a ghost. No porch light, no phone flashlight. She checked the driveway, glanced at the neighbors' windows, then crouched near the trash bins. Her movements were too deliberate, too rehearsed. I noticed how she kept her head turned away from the doorbell camera, angling herself just outside its range. She was avoiding being seen. When she came back inside, her smile was perfectly composed. She smelled faintly of disinfectant, a professional habit she'd always say, but that night it was stronger, sharper, mixed with something metallic. She said, "I just don't want you slipping out there, Mother. The ground's icy and you know your knees." I nodded, pretending to buy the story. But I had spent decades reading patients' body language, seeing the tremor in their fingers when they lied about taking medication. Aurora's voice was too sweet, her eyes too fixed. And the next night, the same thing. And the one after. Always just before midnight. Always carrying the trash herself. So I started watching the details. The sound of the bag when she lifted it heavier than kitchen waste should be. The faint chemical smell that lingered near the door after she returned. It wasn't bleach or detergent. It was sterile synthetic, almost like the cleaning solutions we used in operating rooms. One evening, I reached into the bin after she left, pretending to adjust the lid. The bag was warm, heavier than usual, dense like it held something more than leftovers. I stood there, my breath fogging in the cold air, my mind spinning through every possible explanation. And then I realized she wasn't just taking out the trash. She was removing something she didn't want anyone else to see. From that night on, I decided that if Aurora was building a pattern, I would break it quietly, precisely the way only an old nurse could. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the clock glowing 12:27 a.m. Outside, the wind dragged across the siding, low and restless. Then I heard it, faint, fragile, almost human. A sound so soft it could have been imagined, but not by me. Years in hospitals had trained my ear too well. It was a weak cry, the kind newborns make when they're half asleep and half in pain. It came again, broken, rhythmic, mechanical, almost like someone had recorded a baby's sobs and set them on repeat, just low enough to pierce through the quiet. I sat up, heart tightening. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then the nurse in me took over. First rule, don't rush in blind. I slipped on my robe, pulled on nitrile gloves from the emergency kit I kept by the pantry, and tied a disposable mask around my face. I flicked on the porch light. It buzzed to life, casting a cold halo over the yard. The sound came from near the trash bins. Instinct told me to grab my phone. Before touching anything, I opened the camera and started recording, my voice calm, stating the date, time, and location. It wasn't paranoia. It was procedure. Documentation is what separates the victim from the fool. If Aurora thought she could stage something under my roof, she'd underestimated how many years I'd spent protecting evidence, not feelings. I stepped closer, slow, careful. The air smelled faintly chemical again, that same sterile bite I'd noticed before. The crying continued soft, but patterned like a loop meant to unsettle. My hands didn't shake. Instead, I noted the details. The bag was heavy, sealed tight, and slightly shifting from the wind or from something else. Suddenly, the motion light from my neighbor's porch flicked on, flooding the fence line with silver. At the same time, their cat darted across the yard, hissing, fur raised. My phone caught it all on video. The sound, the movement, the timestamp. Proof that I wasn't dreaming. I crouched beside the bin, pulse, steady breathing, slow through the mask. The crying stopped as abruptly as it began, leaving a silence so sharp it felt alive. I whispered to myself, "Old age isn't weakness. Calm is the weapon." Then carefully I reached for the edge of the bag. When I finally peeled the edge of the plastic open, the smell that escaped wasn't decay. It was disinfectant, sharp, sterile, unmistakable. I took another breath through my mask and tilted my phone flashlight toward the opening. Inside the bag, wrapped in a white cloth, stamped with the logo of St. Augustine Memorial Hospital, was a small silver recording device. The red indicator light was blinking, steady, relentless. I didn't need to press play. It was already looping the same faint sound, the crying of a baby. Mechanical, haunting, deliberate. Someone had planted it. I turned off the device carefully without touching the cloth. The nurse in me took over again. No panic, only process. Contamination ruins evidence. I retrieved a clean zip bag from the drawer by the back door, slid the wrapped recorder inside, and sealed it. Then I wrote the date, time, and location on a label, using my black marker, just as I used to label blood samples in the ward. Everything documented, precise, defensible. Next, I took out my phone and photographed everything, the trash bags still in the bin. The position of the bins near the fence, the faint, muddy footprints leading toward the porch. Women's shoes, size 7, maybe 8. Aurora's size. The ground was damp enough to keep a clear impression. I zoomed in, making sure the timestamp appeared on each image. Then I uploaded the entire video along with the photos straight to my cloud drive. You learn these habits after years of seeing evidence accidentally disappear in hospital investigations. Data without backup isn't evidence, it's a rumor waiting to die. I closed the bin lid slowly and scanned the yard one more time. Everything was quiet now. No crying, No movement, only the hum of the porch light. The white cloth still inside the zip bag bore faint creases, the kind made by folding stacks in a laundry cart. That logo St. Augustine Memorial opened more than one door. Hospitals track every linen batch, every night shift, every supply run. If I could trace that towel, I could trace who handled it. The air felt colder as I locked the back door and set the sealed bag on the kitchen counter. My reflection in the window looked calm, maybe too calm. But calm keeps you alive. I whispered to myself, "This isn't over." And I meant it. Somewhere between the blinking red light and that faint synthetic cry, Aurora Blake had crossed a line. What she didn't know was that she'd left a trail that only someone like me, someone who spent a lifetime labeling, recording, and preserving truth, would know how to follow. By dawn, I understood exactly what Aurora was doing. The entire scene, the late-night trash runs, the fake crying, the hospital towel, it was all theater. She wanted to create the perfect narrative, the senile mother-in-law who hears babies crying in the garbage and starts rambling about conspiracies. It would make me sound unstable, paranoid, unfit to manage my own estate. And once I was labeled that way, she and my son would inherit everything without question. It was clever, I'll admit that. Cruel, too. But I'd spent a lifetime in rooms where people lied with a smile while holding a scalpel. Aurora Blake had just forgotten one thing I'd seen worse. I didn't confront her that morning. Not yet. That would have been exactly what she wanted to catch me off guard and emotional. Instead, I poured myself coffee and began a different ritual. In a small leather-bound notebook, I wrote down the details: time, 12:27 a.m. Odor, chemical object recovered. Wrapped in hospital linen, video recorded and uploaded. Then I drew a small star next to it, my mark for ongoing patterns. Every night from now on would be documented, measured, preserved. If she wanted to play a long game, she'd find I had more patience than she could ever fake. By 8 o'clock, I called Dylan Walsh, an old friend from my hospital days, who'd gone on to become a defense attorney. His voice, calm and methodical as ever, steadied me. I told him everything: the sound, the recorder, the towel, even the footprints. He listened in silence, then said, "Scarlett, what you're describing is harassment and psychological manipulation. You're doing the right thing preserving evidence. Keep a log, timestamp everything, and don't touch that device again. When you feel unsafe, you call me before you call the police. We'll manage chain of custody together." I thanked him, writing his advice word for word in the notebook. That evening, while Aurora hummed in the kitchen, acting like the model daughter-in-law, I moved quietly around the yard. Under the shade of the oak tree near the back fence, I hid a small, wide-angle camera pointing toward the bins. The lens was almost invisible, blending into the bark. Inside the house near my bedroom window, I placed a portable air quality monitor. If she ever tried introducing chemicals or fumes again, I'd have readings to prove it. No confrontation, no raised voice, just patience and data. By the time I went to bed, the house was still peaceful on the surface. But underneath, the war had begun, not of shouting, but of observation. Aurora thought she was crafting my downfall. She had no idea she'd just given me a reason to fight with precision. Before all this began, I used to think of my life as steady, predictable, and even a little boring. After 40 years as the head nurse at Cleveland Medical Center, I had learned to find peace in routine. Every shift I ever led ran like clockwork: medication rounds, at 8 chart updates, at 9 family consultations before noon. I built my life around precision because precision saves lives. Even after retirement, the habit never left me. I still wrote everything down: what time the mail came, when I watered the garden, which neighbor's car passed by too slowly. People laughed, said I was obsessive. But order was the only thing that kept chaos from winning. The fall that ended my career was small, stupid. Even a slick floor in the ward, a tray of saline bottles, a momentary slip. I tore the ligaments in my hip, and the doctor told me I'd never handle 12-hour shifts again. The hospital gave me an early retirement package and an insurance settlement of $350,000. I remember the number because it felt like the price tag of a life I wasn't ready to leave behind. Aurora knew that number too. After my husband passed, the house felt emptier than the hospital corridors at midnight. My son Jacob moved back in, bringing his new wife Aurora Blake, a bright and ambitious nurse, 15 years his junior. At first, I was grateful for the company. Jacob had always been gentle, too gentle, if I'm honest. He adored me, but he was a man who avoided storms, even when standing in the rain. Aurora noticed that weakness immediately. The house, a modest 2-story in the suburbs of Cleveland Heights, was in my name alone. Paid off long before Jacob's marriage. The deed, the property tax receipts, even the utilities, all under Scarlett Donovan. I didn't think much about it until Aurora started asking small questions that didn't sound small. Do you have a will? Mom, does Jacob know where you keep the insurance papers? Shouldn't we update things in case you fall again? Her tone was always wrapped in concern, but her eyes were measuring. I'd seen that look before on interns eyeing promotions, not family. Under Ohio law, if an elder is declared mentally incompetent, control of their estate can shift to the next of kin or their guardian. In my case, that meant Aurora through Jacob. The thought used to seem far-fetched. Now it felt like the script she was writing, one careful gesture at a time. I've always believed that good nurses never stop observing. And though my badge now sits in a drawer, I still see everything, every glance, every word, too sweet to trust. That's why when the nights turned strange and the kindness felt rehearsed, I didn't panic. I just began taking notes again, the way I used to, line by line, hour by hour. Because in my world, truth is always documented. Jacob has always been the kind of man people describe as gentle, sensitive, thoughtful, the kind who apologizes even when he isn't at fault. As a boy, he'd cry when other kids got hurt. As a man, that empathy turned into guilt, a constant need to make peace, to fix things he didn't break. He became a software engineer good at solving problems that required logic, not confrontation. But life at home was never as clean as code. He worked mostly on contract flying between Chicago and New York for weeks at a time. On average, he was gone 20 days a month, leaving Aurora in charge of everything here. He often called me from airports, his voice tired but soft. How's Aurora, Mom? Is she treating you okay? I always said yes because I didn't want to worry him. He'd sigh relieved, then add, I sent her some extra money this week just to make things easier. He never asked for receipts, never checked the balances. In his mind, he was doing the right thing, supporting the woman, caring for his aging mother. What he didn't see was how Aurora used that guilt, like a key, turning it whenever she wanted something opened. Whenever Jacob was on video call, Aurora would make sure to appear in the background, apron on, tea in hand, a soft smile on her face. Sometimes she'd even lean over and say, Your mom's been doing great, honey. We're fine here, don't you worry. Jacob believed every word. He wanted to believe. That was his flaw, the same one his father used to have, trusting love more than evidence. It wasn't until later that I learned she'd convinced him to sign a temporary financial power of attorney before one of his business trips. Just a practical measure, she'd told him. In case there's an emergency, I can handle bills or repairs. He'd signed it without hesitation, his pen moving faster than his thoughts. To him, it was trust. To her, it was opportunity. With that document, Aurora could legally access their joint accounts, transfer funds, pay contractors, even close investments, all under the guise of responsibility. When Jacob returned home, everything always looked perfect. The house clean, dinner warm, Aurora affectionate. He never noticed the subtle rearrangements, the new jewelry, the faint smell of luxury candles, the small packages arriving during his absences. He lived in the illusion she built a digital marriage where every video call was a stage, every smile rehearsed. I used to wonder if I should tell him, but watching his face light up when Aurora appeared on screen, I couldn't bring myself to. There's no heartbreak sharper than realizing the person you defend is the one destroying your peace. So I stayed silent for now. But silence, I've learned, can be a powerful kind of evidence too. Aurora Blake was the kind of woman people admired instantly. 34, striking without trying, the kind of beauty that drew attention in hospital corridors, even when she wore a mask. Sharp eyes, steady hands, a practiced smile, she could make anyone feel seen, comforted, understood. As an ER nurse, she knew how to read faces, how to mirror emotion like a script learned by heart. To strangers, she was the perfect blend of intelligence, compassion, and control. To me, she was something else entirely. Behind closed doors, that smile vanished. The warmth in her voice turned to ice. She spoke to me the way one speaks to a patient they've already written off, polite, but detached, with that faint undertone of superiority that nurses use when they think you won't notice. I once heard her mutter under her breath, "You dress like someone stuck in the 70s, Scarlett." The words weren't meant to reach me, but they did. She saw my cardigans and pearl earrings not as comfort, but as weakness. In her mind, I was a relic, old, slow, out of touch. Whenever someone mentioned children, her tone would sharpen. She'd laugh lightly and say, "Having kids is just wasting your body for 20 years. Or, "I like my figure the way it is, thank you." Jacob never argued. He'd just look down uncomfortable, pretending not to hear. I understood then that motherhood to her was a burden, something that stole attention from herself. Still, Aurora was clever enough to keep her secrets neatly folded away. Her phone never left her side. Her passwords changed monthly, and she paid bills online late at night when Jacob was asleep. I knew that kind of secrecy. It wasn't caution, it was concealment. Eventually, through a careless notification and a bit of instinct, I found traces of her hidden spending. A Sephora credit line maxed out. A Macy's account past due. More than $25,000 owed. None of it appeared on the shared statements Jacob checked. She'd built her own private economy of debt, one hidden beneath layers of charm and performance. And then there was the story I overheard from an old colleague still working at Cleveland Medical, a quiet warning passed between sips of coffee. Aurora had been formally cautioned for a missing bottle of painkillers during a night shift. The incident never reached administration. Someone higher up had smoothed it over a favor, they said. That told me everything I needed to know. She was bold enough to steal and smart enough to erase the trail. People like Aurora thrive on perception. They survive because others want to believe the illusion. But illusions don't scare me. I spent 40 years watching lies unravel in hospital beds, and I know how to wait. Because every perfect mask, no matter how convincing, eventually slips. It began the way most deceptions do, with a smile and a promise that sounded generous. One evening while Jacob was away in Chicago, Aurora sat at the dining table sipping tea and saying how she and Jacob were thinking about buying a bigger house one day. She reached across, touched my hand, and said softly, "We want you to have more space, Mom. Somewhere quiet, maybe, with a garden. We're saving every bit for you." The words sounded warm, even loving. I didn't notice then that she never said with whose money. Over the next few weeks, Aurora began taking over the household finances under the guise of helping. She offered to set up online payments so I wouldn't have to stand in line at the post office anymore. "You shouldn't worry about bills, Mom," she said. "Let me take care of it. I'll make it automatic so you can relax." She even smiled when she handed me a small debit card linked to my account. "This is just a convenience card so I can pay things for you quickly." Her tone was honey sweet, her logic flawless. I let her. After all, she was family. It wasn't until my monthly statement arrived that I realized something was wrong. The electricity, water, gas, and property taxes all had been paid directly from my account, not theirs. When I added the numbers, I nearly dropped my pen. Over $1,200 in a single month. My pension and insurance payout could handle it, but still something felt wrong. I showed Aurora the statement. She gasped just right, eyes widening like a practiced actress. "Oh, Mom, this must be a system glitch." "Don't worry, I'll call the bank right now and fix it." She hurried to her phone, walked to the living room, and spoke in low tones for several minutes. When she returned, she smiled again. All fixed. The bank said it won't happen again, but it did. The next month and the one after. What I didn't know then was that during her call, she'd changed the login credentials for my online banking. The passwords recovery email all switched to hers. Every automatic payment now went through the card she'd registered as authorized user. It was legal enough to seem innocent, but intentional enough to be theft. At the time, I only felt confusion, maybe embarrassment for not catching it sooner. I didn't know that what she was doing had a name in the law books. Elder financial exploitation, a felony in the state of Ohio. If discovered, she could face criminal charges. But that knowledge would come later through Dylan Walsh, the attorney who'd remind me that calm isn't weakness, it's evidence waiting for timing. For now, I wrote the date in my journal and noted the amount withdrawn. Because in medicine and in justice, the first step is always documentation. There's a particular kind of silence that comes with suspicion, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, watchful kind. I lived inside that silence for months. Every instinct in me wanted to confront Aurora, to grab her by the shoulders and demand the truth. But every time I imagined Jacob's face, I stopped. My son was the soft part of my heart, the only person I'd never wanted to hurt. He loved his wife, and I couldn't bear to be the one to shatter his illusion. So I stayed quiet. I smiled when Aurora smiled, nodded when she spoke sweetly, and pretended not to notice when her eyes shifted cold the moment Jacob's car pulled out of the driveway. Instead, I began to write. Each morning after my coffee, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my small leather journal. Every entry had a date, a time, and a description, Aurora's exact departure for work, the faint smell of chemical cleanser that lingered in the hall after she left, the sound of her footsteps when she returned late at night. I wrote about the way she hovered near the trash bins, the way she stared at the mail before setting it down, and the way her laughter never reached her eyes. It wasn't paranoia, it was documentation. I had learned long ago that truth fades without records. A few weeks later, I told Aurora I'd ordered a Ring doorbell camera for safety. I even joked about crime in the neighborhood, about how older women like me made easy targets. She smiled, pretending to agree, and even helped me install it. I didn't tell her that the device had cloud backup and audio capture. I only said, "It helps me sleep better." And it did not because I felt safer, but because I was finally watching. Then one evening while reviewing the recordings, I heard something I wasn't supposed to. Aurora was standing on the porch, phone pressed to her ear. She didn't know the microphone was still on. The recording picked up her voice low but clear, muttering to someone on the other end. Just a little more and she'll start losing it. Once she does, everything gets easier. My blood ran cold. I replayed it again and again, each time feeling my heartbeat slow until it matched the steady red light blinking on the screen. I saved the clip in 3 separate folders, phone, cloud, external drive. I didn't tell anyone. not Jacob, not even Dylan. Not yet. Because in medicine, you don't announce a diagnosis before the test results are confirmed. You observe record and wait. That night, as the house fell silent, I wrote one line in my journal before closing it. Aurora is not careless. She's calculating. But she just left her first trace. It started subtly, the kind of change only someone observant would notice. I began to keep track of the time Aurora returned home each night, marking it neatly in my journal beside the weather and the day's events. 11:32, 11:41, sometimes close to midnight. Always late, always quiet, always moving with purpose. She often came back still wearing her hospital scrubs, faintly splattered with something darker than coffee stains, her hair tied too tight, her shoulders tense. The air around her carried a sharp, sterile scent, the kind that clings to gloves and masks long after you've left the ER. But what unsettled me wasn't her exhaustion. It was the bags. She never came home empty-handed. Each time Aurora would lift a heavy black trash bag from the trunk of her car, carry it into the house, and disappear down the hall before emerging minutes later to throw that same bag into the outdoor bin. It wasn't trash leaving the house, it was trash entering it first. That small reversal bothered me. Nurses are creatures of habit. We do things in order and routine. But Aurora's routine was backward. One night, while the clock ticked past 11:30 and the street outside fell silent, I waited by the window. The porch light threw a pale circle on the driveway. When Aurora's car finally pulled in, I could already smell it, that sharp, stinging odor cutting through the cool Ohio air. Not bleach, not ammonia. Something colder, heavier. It took me a second to place it. Formaldehyde. The scent snapped me back to my years in pathology labs when I'd open the specimen fridge and that same chemical breath would hit me in the face. My stomach turned. There was no reason that smell should follow her home. I watched her drag the bag across the gravel, her steps careful, deliberate. For a moment, she paused near the bin, glancing at the Ring doorbell. I saw her hesitate, as if remembering it was there before angling her body slightly away from the lens. Then just as quietly, she slipped the bag inside and went in without looking back. After she disappeared into the house, I opened my journal again, my hands steady, despite the chill creeping up my arms. I wrote May 3rd, 11:46 p.m. Aurora returned in uniform, carried in one heavy trash bag, unusual weight, strong chemical odor resembling formaldehyde. Possible medical materials. The words felt clinical, detached, the way I'd once written patient reports. But beneath them, my pulse was unsteady. I didn't know exactly what she was doing, not yet. But I knew that smell, and I knew how easily it could be used to manipulate perception. Someone like Aurora didn't bring hospital waste home by mistake. She was building something piece by piece, and I was beginning to suspect that the stage she was setting was my own downfall. The sound woke me just after midnight, a faint rustling like something shifting against plastic. At first, I thought it was a rat. The wind had been strong that night, rattling the trash bins against the fence. But then it came again, sharper this time, a wet kind of noise, the kind that doesn't belong to wind or metal. I slipped on my robe, grabbed the flashlight, and stepped outside. The porch light flickered on with a dull click, spilling a yellow glow across the yard. The noise came from the main trash bin. I lifted the lid slowly. The smell hit first sour chemical and something else underneath the heavy rot of organic matter. Then the movement caught my eye. A wave of white squirming alive. Hundreds of tiny white worms, maggots, spilling over the edge, glistening under the light. For a moment I froze. I'd seen worse in hospitals, infections, wounds, crawling with larvae, but never in my own backyard. I leaned closer, holding the flashlight steady, and that's when I saw it, a surgical mask half buried beneath the mass of moving white. It was stained dark red at the center, fading into brown and gray at the edges. Blood and mucus, the kind of residue that never belongs in household trash. My stomach turned, but my mind stayed clear. Training takes over where fear fails. I stepped back, inhaled slowly through my mouth, and reached for the gloves in my pocket. One by one, the details arranged themselves like clues. Aurora coming home late with heavy bags, the sharp odor of disinfectant, the way she angled herself away from the camera. Now this, not random, not negligence deliberate. Someone was planting contamination. I went back inside, retrieved a sterile zip bag from my first aid kit, and returned to the bin. Carefully, I used a pair of tongs to lift the mask, sealed it inside the bag, and pressed the air out. Then I took photos, wide shots of the bin close-ups of the maggots, the stains, the timestamp glowing on my phone screen. After that, I slipped the sealed bag into the small medical fridge I kept for medications, labeling it in my neat handwriting, Specimen A12, 18 a.m., June 8th. Standing there, I felt the air thicken with something that wasn't just fear. It was realization. This wasn't a prank, not even a scare tactic. It was a setup, a biological one. If Aurora wanted to poison me, there were cleaner ways. This was different. She wanted evidence of filth, infection, neglect. She wanted to create the picture of an old woman losing control of her home, her hygiene, her mind. And the worst part, it was working, at least on paper. But she'd made a mistake. I wasn't just an old woman. I was a nurse. And nurses know that what looks like decay can also be data, the start of a report that ends in justice. The next morning, I couldn't get the image out of my head, the mask, the blood, the maggots crawling like something out of a morgue. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my coffee until one detail finally surfaced from the fog. That mask hadn't been random. I knew that shade of blue, the pattern of the folded edge, the faint printed label near the corner. It was mine. From the CVS pharmacy down on Mayfield Road. I'd bought that exact brand, Pure Breathe, 2 months earlier during pollen season. I kept the box in my bedroom closet, used only for sleeping when my sinuses acted up. No one else even knew it was there. When the house emptied, Aurora at work, Jacob out on a trip, I went to check. The box sat where it always had, tucked beside my nightstand drawer. But when I lifted the lid, the neat rows inside were uneven. 4 masks missing. I counted twice to be sure. Then I compared the texture to the one I'd sealed in the specimen bag last night. The same fiber, same faint lavender scent from the fabric softener I used on the sheets. My throat tightened. There was only one way those masks could have left this room. Someone had entered it. Aurora had crossed a line. This wasn't about money anymore, or even manipulation. This was intrusion into the only private space I had left. My bedroom. My sanctuary. Under Ohio's elder privacy and safety law, what she had done could be prosecuted as elder harassment and invasion of privacy. I didn't know the full extent of the law, not yet, but I knew one thing from decades of charting patient abuse cases: when boundaries break, once they never stop, unless someone enforces them. That afternoon, I went to the hardware store in town. The clerk, a kind man in his 60s, helped me choose a new lock set and a spare key. "Changing rooms?" he asked with a grin. "Something like that," I said, keeping my tone light. By evening, I'd replaced the lock on my bedroom door and installed it myself. My hands still remembered how to steady a screwdriver. Then from an old nursing kit, I retrieved a small infrared camera, a model I'd once used for night shift safety training. I tucked it discreetly between the books on my shelf, its lens no bigger than a button. It connected to my phone through an app I'd reactivated under a new name. No one would know it was there. Not Aurora. Not even Jacob. When the setup was done, I sat on the edge of my bed, breathing slowly. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt like home. It felt like a patient room under observation mine. I wrote the date and time in my journal and added one line beneath it. She's entered my room once. She will come again. This time I'll be ready. It was around that time the pattern became too precise to ignore. Every strange event, every unsettling detail began to fit together like bones in a single body. The baby cries from the recorder, the chemical odor on the trash, the white larvae crawling out from my own medical mask. The objects in the house, a picture frame slightly tilted. My pill cup moved from the nightstand to the kitchen counter, the window latch mysteriously unlocked. Each thing alone might have seemed trivial, but together they painted one clear motive. Aurora wasn't trying to harm me physically. She was trying to make me doubt my own mind. The realization hit me with the cold clarity of diagnosis. I'd seen this before in hospitals in families where elder abuse wore the mask of care. The abuser doesn't strike. They whisper. They rearrange. They create small distortions in reality until the victim begins to question what's true. Aurora was building a case, not in a courtroom, but in the eyes of everyone who mattered. I recalled her conversation with our neighbor, Mrs. Talbot, a week earlier. I had been watering the hydrangeas when I heard Aurora's voice float through the hedge. "I'm really worried about Mom lately," she said, with that soft, syrupy tone she reserved for sympathy. "She keeps misplacing things. Yesterday she forgot her own house key. I'm afraid she's starting to slip." Mrs. Talbot gasped, hand on her chest. Oh dear. She always seemed so sharp. I remember the smile Aurora gave sad, brave patient, the perfect daughter-in-law. I stood behind the hedge, silent, my heart pounding. In a single sentence, she'd rewritten me into a fragile woman losing her memory. That night, I went online and read for hours medical journals, case reports, anything about sedatives and cognitive side effects. I knew Aurora worked in the ER, which meant she had access to controlled substances, including mild tranquilizers used for patient anxiety. A low enough dose mixed into food could cause fatigue, confusion, or forgetfulness symptoms easy to mistake for early dementia. I began to watch what I ate to note when she offered to cook. From that point on, every dish Aurora prepared went straight into its own labeled container, sealed and stored in the deep freezer. I marked each one carefully. Chicken soup, 0718, 6:45 p.m., prepared by Aurora. Tea, 0720. Morning. It wasn't paranoia, it was procedure. In the U.S., physical evidence must be preserved in its original condition to be admissible. I knew that from years of documenting patient samples. If Aurora was poisoning my mind, she'd underestimated me. She thought she was planting confusion. What she didn't realize was that I was collecting data. And someday, when the time came to prove what she'd done, those small frozen containers would speak louder than any tears she could fake. The next morning, I drove to meet Dylan Walsh, one of the few people I still trusted completely. We'd known each other for years, first as colleagues in patient rights advocacy, later as friends. He was a lawyer now, specializing in elder abuse and exploitation cases. The kind of man who could read both the law and human motives with the same precision. When I told him everything, the fake baby cries, the chemicals, the worms, the missing masks, he didn't interrupt once. He just listened. His brow furrowed, the pen in his hand, unmoving. When I finished, he exhaled slowly, as if weighing each word before he spoke. "Scarlett." He said, his voice calm but sharp. This isn't just harassment. What she's doing fits the state's definition of intentional psychological and physical harm to an elder. That's a felony in Ohio. I leaned back, my pulse steadying at the word felony. He continued, "But you can't confront her. Not yet. Once you tip her off, she'll destroy or clean up every trace. The key here is documentation, timeline, consistency, evidence. You've already done half the work with your notes and photos. Now tighten it. Record every detail, timestamp, storage, origin of every item you suspect. If she's tampering with food, get lab tests done privately, but keep receipts, chain of custody, everything. We'll need admissibility later." He opened his tablet and showed me a sample layout columns for dates, descriptions, supporting files. If we can prove repeated acts designed to cause psychological distress or health harm, the law will classify it as elder endangerment under criminal statute. He paused, eyes narrowing. "Do you think she's capable of using restricted substances?" "Yes," I said without hesitation, "and she knows how to hide it." Then Dylan replied, "If you find any trace of chemical residue, don't touch it. Call me first. I'll handle the warrant for property inspection through the county court. And one more thing, I'll connect you with a private investigator I trust. He prefers to stay anonymous, but he's handled abuse cases inside medical institutions. Discreet, thorough, and patient like you." For a long moment, I said nothing. The restaurant's low hum filled the space between us. Then I felt something shift. Not fear, not anger, but clarity. I turned my coffee cup slowly, watching the reflection of the morning light ripple across its surface. "She thinks I'm just a confused old woman," I said, my voice even. "I've spent a lifetime caring for patients who lost their minds. But this," I looked up, a thin smile curving at the edge of my lips, "this is the first case I'll be treating my own way." Dylan's eyes met mine, steady and approving. "Then let's build your case, nurse," he said quietly. And that was the moment I stopped being the victim and became the investigator. Dylan spread the documents across his desk, his eyes scanning each page with the kind of focus that made silence feel heavier. My notes, the photos, the labeled food containers. Everything I'd gathered sat between us like pieces of a puzzle finally taking shape. He leaned back, hands folded, and said quietly, "Scarlett, what you're looking at isn't just cruelty, it's a legal setup." I frowned. "A setup?" He nodded. "Yes. What she's doing fits a pattern we call gaslighting for guardianship. It's rare, but it happens especially when inheritance or property is involved. She's not trying to drive you insane for her amusement. She's building a record to make you appear incompetent in the eyes of the court. If she succeeds, you lose legal control over your estate." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. "You mean—" "Exactly," Dylan said. "Under Ohio inheritance law, if an elder is declared mentally incapacitated, the court can appoint a guardian, usually the next of kin. Since Jacob is your only child, his wife automatically qualifies as a potential legal guardian. If she can prove you're delusional or unsafe on your own, she'll have authority over your house, your finances, even your healthcare decisions." I stared at the table. Suddenly, every little thing Aurora had done fell into place. The fake baby cries, the rearranged objects, the whispers to neighbors. It wasn't random cruelty, it was documentation. Dylan pointed to one of the photos on his screen, a still from the Ring doorbell video. "She's probably already started compiling her own version of events. Maybe she's writing incident logs, claiming you talk to yourself, that you're paranoid, that you accuse her of things that never happened. It's classic legal gaslighting. Eventually, she'll use that to get a psychological evaluation order." I sat back in silence. For years, I'd handled fragile patients who couldn't speak for themselves. Now I was becoming one by design. Dylan's voice softened, but stayed firm. "You're dealing with someone intelligent enough to weaponize the system, so we fight her with precision, not emotion. Keep every note dated, every file backed up. And remember, the law isn't just on her side, it's on yours too, if we stay ahead. A slow, cold clarity filled me. Aurora wasn't poisoning me with chemicals. She was poisoning the narrative, rewriting me into a woman who no longer existed. I looked up at Dylan and whispered, "She thinks she can kill me without touching me." Then I straightened my shoulders, my tone turning sharp. "But I've spent my life signing death certificates. I can tell when someone's still alive, and I'm very much alive, Dylan. She'll learn that soon enough." That night, I decided it was time to stop guessing and start watching. The next morning, I'd gone into town and bought a small, motion-activated security camera, an Arlo Go 2 model, compact enough to fit inside a flower pot. When I came home, I placed it carefully in the ceramic orchid planter on the front porch, angling the lens just right, so it covered both the trash bins and the back walkway. From the street, it looked like nothing more than a harmless garden decoration. From my iPad, it became a window into the truth. I turned off the lights early, around 10:30, letting the house fall into darkness. The old clock in the hall ticked softly each second, stretching longer than the one before. I lay in bed, still in my robe, the iPad screen dim beside me. The camera feed glowed faintly black and white night vision, with the faint shimmer of the dew reflecting the porch light. I waited. At exactly 11:57 p.m., the screen flickered. Movement. The back door eased open just enough to let a figure slip through. Aurora. She was still in her scrubs, her hair pulled tight, her steps cautious but practiced. In one hand, she carried a black trash bag. In the other, a small object glowing with a pulsing red light, the recorder. My throat tightened. She looked around, scanning the yard, the fence, the neighboring windows. Then she crouched near the bins, moving quickly, as if she'd done this before. I forced myself not to move, not even to breathe too loudly. My finger hovered over the record button, but I didn't press it, not yet. I wanted to be sure. Then she bent lower, untying the trash bag, slipping something inside. The red light blinked once, twice, before disappearing under the plastic. I pressed record. The screen captured everything: the angle of her face, the way she glanced over her shoulder, the faint reflection of the porch light on her wristwatch. The camera's data uploaded instantly to the cloud, a feature I had double-checked earlier. Even if she found the camera and destroyed it, the footage would survive. I watched the progress bar inch across the screen, my heartbeat steady, my face calm. For years, I had learned to stay still in emergencies, during surgeries, during crises. Tonight, that same discipline kept me silent while my own home turned into a crime scene. Aurora tied the bag again, adjusted her scrubs, and vanished back through the door. The porch returned to stillness, only the hum of the night air and the faint chirp of cicadas filling the silence. I stopped. The recording exhaled slowly and saved the clip with a new name, 11:57, evidence red light object. Then I whispered to myself, almost a vow, "You've been very careful, Aurora, but now I have eyes too." The footage was clearer than I could have hoped for. On the camera's night vision feed, every movement appeared in crisp detail: the flicker of the porch light, the faint mist of her breath in the cold air, and Aurora's silhouette bending over the trash bin. She moved with the precision of someone who had rehearsed every step. In her gloved hand, she held a small black device no bigger than a phone, its indicator light blinking faintly. I watched as she crouched down, slipped the device into the trash bag, then tore off a strip of silver duct tape and sealed it shut. After that, she sprinkled something around the bin tufts of cotton and a splash of pale liquid that soaked into the ground like spilled milk. When she stepped back, the scene looked random, almost innocent. Almost. The next morning, I pretended to wake late. Through the window, I saw Aurora already outside, standing near the trash bins, a hand pressed dramatically to her mouth. Her voice carried across the yard. "Oh my God! Someone threw something disgusting in Mom's trash bin." She called loud enough for Mrs. Talbot next door to hear. Within seconds, the neighbor came out in her robe, clutching her coffee. Aurora's performance was flawless. She gasped, pointed, even covered her nose as if horrified. "It smells awful, like spoiled milk, and I don't even know chemicals. Maybe I'm so scared someone's trying to hurt her." Her tone trembled with fake concern. The perfect daughter-in-law defending her poor, fragile mother. I stepped outside just long enough to play my part. Confusion, mild concern, nothing more. "What's happening?" I asked softly. "Oh dear. Maybe it's just an animal," I added, my voice calm, almost naive. Aurora glanced at me, her eyes wide with mock sympathy. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll handle it. You shouldn't see this." Then she turned back to the neighbor, continuing her act. I stayed silent, watching her hands flutter like an actress finishing her scene. Inside, my heart was steady. Every second was captured, every word preserved. As soon as Aurora left for work, I closed my door and sent the entire clip to Dylan through a secure folder. The upload completed in under a minute. I texted only 2 words. "Got her." Within an hour, he replied, "Understood. I'm backing it up now." Later that day, he called. "Scarlett, this is enough to open an initial case file. I've already forwarded the footage to Columbus PD. They've labeled it as a suspicious elder harassment incident. It's the first step toward a formal investigation. You did everything right." I sat by the window watching the same trash bin that had once terrified me. It no longer looked threatening. It looked like evidence. Aurora's perfect story had started to crack 1 pixel at a time. And for the first time in months, I allowed myself a small, silent smile. It was Dylan who called first, his voice carrying that clipped, steady tone I'd come to recognize the sound of a man who'd just uncovered something serious. "Scarlett," he said, "we got her digital trail." Earlier that week, Aurora had left her laptop open at home while rushing to work. Dylan, through a private forensic IT specialist he trusted, obtained a lawful snapshot of the device's system data. The specialist mirrored the hard drive, every file, every search term, every cached page, without altering a single byte. By the afternoon, Dylan had a printed report in hand, Aurora's browser history in black and white. When I met him in his office, he turned the pages slowly, almost ceremonially. "Look here," he said, tapping a finger against the first column. Chrome history log, 9:42 p.m. Tuesday. The first search read signs of dementia in seniors. The next, how to file elder guardianship, Ohio. Then legal proof of delusion, elderly. The timestamps were chillingly consistent, each search within minutes of the next, like she was building a checklist. "She's not improvising anymore," Dylan said quietly. "She's structuring a case. Step 1, establish symptoms. Step 2, find the process to file for guardianship. Step 3, create evidence of delusion." He flipped to another page. And this he added, sliding a printed email across the desk. It was from Aurora's Gmail account dated just 2 nights before the fake crying incident. The subject line, private consultation. The message, I'd like to schedule a cognitive assessment for my mother-in-law. She's been hallucinating, hearing babies cry, believing someone's following her. I'm deeply concerned about her mental stability. I felt the blood drain from my face. The words looked so polite, so professional, yet they were poison dressed as compassion. Aurora wasn't just preparing to frame me, she was already filing the paperwork to prove it. Dylan handed me the final document, the digital evidence chain form, complete with the forensic technician's signature timestamp and case ID. This, he said, makes the data admissible in court. It proves the evidence wasn't tampered with. She can't deny it or claim hacking. We have her intent in writing in her own searches in her own words. For a long time, I couldn't speak. The office clock ticked behind me, steady and indifferent. Finally, I looked up. So she's already started the process to have me declared incompetent. Dylan nodded grimly. Yes. She's not trying to hurt you physically, Scarlett. She's trying to erase your signature from your own life. I stared at the stack of papers Aurora's calculated betrayal preserved line by line, date by date. And then for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt focus. She's built her case, I said softly. Now it's my turn to build mine. I started to notice the small changes in what Aurora cooked long before I could name the danger. The same soups she brought when Jacob was away tasted off in a way I could not ignore. There was a faint bitterness under the broth, a thin metallic edge in the fruit juice she left on my nightstand. At first, I wondered if she was experimenting with new recipes or if staff cafeteria food had altered her palate. Then one night, as I sat with the spoon halfway to my lips, my training as a nurse clicked on like a switch. Certain sedatives and antihistamines leave a bitter aftertaste and a slow blankness that settles over speech and thought. I had seen that blankness on patients who were given low doses, usually to calm agitation. It was the look of a mind nudged sideways. When I told Dylan what I had tasted, his voice over the phone went quiet for a moment. He explained that the pattern fit a tactic he had seen in elder abuse prosecutions. A little of a sedative or an antihistamine could be mixed into soup and juice. It would not kill. It would make a person drowsy, forgetful, and sometimes disoriented for hours, enough to mimic cognitive decline over time. He warned that proving it required preserved samples and clinical testing, but he also said the intent was clear if we could show a timeline of exposure and effects. I stopped eating Aurora's food when she was watching. That was obvious. But I also knew that stopping outright would risk exposing my hand and making Jacob suspicious. So I started a different, quieter game. I let small slips happen when she least expected them. I misplaced my keys in the morning and called out to Jacob using his middle name instead of his usual short name. I mixed up the names of television hosts and told the same slightly wrong anecdote twice at dinner. My performance had to be convincing, but calculated. I could not simply rebel. I had to bait. Those staged lapses did two things at once. They made Aurora comfortable enough to accelerate her plan because she thought the symptoms were emerging more quickly. At the same time, they distracted from my evidence gathering since a neighbor might hear and assume I was genuinely declining. Behind the scenes, I was cataloging every episode in my journal. I wrote the exact time I ate a bowl of her soup, what I tasted, and how long the drowsiness lasted. I took photos of unopened cartons and labeled frozen portions of meals she had prepared. I kept measuring spoons and small sealed containers in a locked drawer. In the private hours, I wrote an entry that felt more like a vow than a note. If she wants me to become unhinged, I wrote, then I will show her how dangerous true madness can be. The sentence surprised even me when I read it aloud to the empty kitchen. It was not a threat. It was a promise that I would not be erased by paperwork and whispers. From passive endurance, I had shifted into strategy. I was no longer merely surviving her campaign. I was preparing traps. I would let her think she was winning, so she would move faster and leave traces. When the time came, the map of her plots would be right there on paper and in frozen jars. The next act of this story would not be her reveal. It would be her undoing. Aurora's kindness had started to taste strange, literally. For weeks, she had insisted on cooking all the meals herself, brushing off my offers to help with that practiced smile. "You've worked your whole life, Mom," she'd say. "Let me take care of you now. It's faster if I cook." The first few times I didn't argue. But the nurse in me, the one who'd spent decades noticing what others missed, began to feel uneasy. The change came gradually subtle at first. The soup she brought from the hospital kitchen always smelled the same comforting, faintly salty safe. But lately, there was something different in the air. One night, as I lifted the spoon to my lips, I caught it a faint metallic tang beneath the surface and a bitterness that lingered at the back of my throat long after the warmth faded. The flavor didn't belong to chicken or herbs. It reminded me of the smell of old IV tubes of medication storage rooms after a long shift. I set the bowl down. My heart didn't race, but my training took over. I fetched a sterilized jar from my locked medical kit, a remnant from my nursing days, and a clean metal spoon. Without saying a word, I took a small portion of the soup, sealed it inside the jar, and labeled it carefully in neat block letters. Sample number 3 chicken soup, 9:14 p.m. Aug 2, prepared by Aurora. I signed beneath it and added the date the same way I'd once logged blood samples for pathology. Every detail mattered. In court, details become truth. When Aurora came into the kitchen a moment later, she glanced at the half-empty bowl. "You didn't finish," she said lightly. "I'm full," I replied. "You cook too well." She smiled, satisfied, and took the bowl away. I listened to the soft sound of her footsteps down the hall, the faint creak of the trash bin lid. The next morning, when she left for work, I went to that same bin. Using gloves, I lifted the liner and sifted through the trash carefully. Under coffee filters and a paper napkin, I saw it a small brown glass vial, the kind hospitals use for injectable medication. The label was half torn but still legible: diazepam, 5 mg injection, RX use only. My stomach dropped. That drug wasn't something you found in home prescriptions. It was used to sedate anxious patients before surgery, and Aurora, as an ER nurse, had access to it. Holding the vial between my fingers, I felt both fury and clarity. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was assault, calculated and clinical. I placed the vial in another sterilized jar, sealed it, labeled it just like the soup sample, and stored both in the back of the small medical fridge beside my bed. In my journal that night, I wrote only one line: "The body doesn't lie, and neither does the evidence it leaves behind." Dylan handled everything with the quiet precision of a man who had done this many times before. The morning after I gave him the sealed jar, he drove straight to Columbus Analytical Labs, a private facility known for forensic work and medical-grade toxicology. He told me later that he had personally delivered the sample, signed the custody form himself, and requested a dual analysis toxicology and pathogen screening. "We'll see what's in that soup," he said, his tone even, but his eyes sharp. The wait took 3 days. I tried to distract myself by cleaning, gardening, anything to keep from thinking about what might have been swirling in the broth I'd nearly finished. On the 4th day, Dylan called and asked me to come by his office. I could tell from the pause in his breathing that the results weren't routine. When I arrived, he didn't speak right away. He simply turned the report toward me. At the top in bold letters, it read, "Certified Laboratory Report, Columbus Analytical Labs." Beneath the toxicology results, a single line was highlighted in yellow: "Pathogen detected. Legionella pneumophila. High concentration, classification, infectious, agent human, pathogen, known effects, severe respiratory illness. Legionnaire's disease, high risk for elderly individuals." I read the words twice slowly. Legionella. I remembered the name from years in the hospital, from elderly patients gasping for breath, their lungs inflamed from inhaling bacteria that thrived in warm, stagnant water. It was deadly if untreated, and someone had placed it in my food. Dylan spoke finally, his voice low. "This isn't negligence. This is premeditation." She knew exactly what she was doing. He handed me a second document, the chain of custody form, with our signatures, timestamps, and the laboratory's certification seal. "This makes it admissible in court. There's no way to challenge the authenticity of this report." He had already taken the next step. I've submitted the preliminary file to the Elder Abuse Unit under the Ohio Attorney General's office, he said. It's officially logged as case number 54EA922. They'll begin covert monitoring immediately. I blinked, processing. You mean they're watching her? Yes, Dylan nodded. Not an arrest yet. We need her to keep acting to make more mistakes. The longer she believes she's invisible, the stronger the case becomes. Every step she takes now will be documented, every purchase, every prescription order, every shift at the hospital. She won't know it, but she's already in the system. I stared at the report again, the scientific printouts, the red seal of certification. For months, Aurora had tried to rewrite reality to make me doubt my senses, my memory, my sanity. But now the truth was ink on paper, signed and sealed. That night, I wrote in my journal, she fed me poison and called it love. But justice is patient, and it just found her scent. Dylan moved swiftly once the lab results came in. He knew the bacteria hadn't appeared by chance. It was part of something larger, deliberate. We're dealing with someone who knows hospital systems, he said. So we need someone who knows how to trace what leaks from them. That's when he called Mark Givens, a retired pharmaceutical inspector turned private investigator, a man with the quiet patience of a hunter. Mark had spent 20 years auditing hospital supply chains, tracking every drop of chemical that vanished between a storage room and the outside world. Within hours, Mark began surveillance on Aurora. For 3 consecutive days, he tailed her discreetly. No confrontations, no contact. On the 3rd evening, just before 10 p.m., his report described what he saw: Aurora's blue sedan parked behind Columbus General Hospital, near the service entrance reserved for staff. She wasn't in uniform, but she wore her ID badge clipped to her pocket, enough to blend in. A few minutes later, a man in a gray warehouse coat stepped out from the supply door, looking around before approaching her. There was a brief exchange, then Aurora handed him a white envelope, thick folded and unmistakably filled with cash. The man pocketed it quickly, then returned inside. The next morning, Mark went to work cross-referencing hospital inventory logs. He still had contacts in the Pharmaceutical Regulatory Board, and one of them quietly provided a copy of Columbus General's internal withdrawal records for that week. 2 materials stood out, both requested under Aurora's login ID, formalin and benzalkonium chloride. Formalin, a formaldehyde solution used for preserving biological tissue. Benzalkonium chloride, a high-level disinfectant. Both are restricted to sterilized environments and strictly prohibited for domestic or personal use. These aren't cleaning agents, Dylan said grimly when he read the list. They're chemical weapons in the wrong hands. Mark returned with photos. Clear night vision images of Aurora standing by the rear gate. The envelope mid-transfer, the timestamp and GPS data embedded in the metadata. Every frame supported the narrative of illicit acquisition. He compiled it all into a formal case file and handed it to Dylan, who immediately began drafting the legal documentation. By the next afternoon, the affidavit was ready, notarized, time-stamped, and filed under the same case number 54EA922. The affidavit attested to the authenticity of Mark's findings, the chain of custody for the video, and the verified origin of the hospital records. With that, the evidence became court-admissible, impossible for Aurora to deny or dismiss as rumor. Dylan looked at me across his desk, his tone steady but dark. This is no longer psychological abuse, Scarlett. It's biochemical assault. And with this affidavit, we're not just protecting you, we're cornering her legally. I nodded slowly. For months, Aurora had made me feel like I was living in a nightmare only I could see. Now, for the first time, the nightmare had witnesses, and they were professionals with badges. That night, I wrote in my journal, she used medicine to harm. I'll use the law to heal and to end her. I began the performance quietly, the way any good deception starts, not with drama, but with consistency. Each morning I moved slower, shuffling instead of walking, letting my breath hitch, as if the air itself had grown heavier. I left half my meals untouched, pushing the bowl away with trembling hands. Sometimes I sat in the living room staring blankly at a magazine, and when Aurora called my name, I blinked twice before answering, as if searching for who she was. At first, she hovered cautious and watchful, but by the third day, her tone softened, her guard lowered. "Mom, you really shouldn't move around so much," she said one night, setting a bowl of soup on the table. "I'll take care of everything. You just rest." Her words sounded kind, but I saw the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes, the quiet triumph of a plan working exactly as intended. That same evening, I watched from the reflection in the window as she poured something from a small vial into my soup, stirring it with careful precision. Later, she sprayed disinfectant across my room, waving her hand through the air. "Hospital grade," she said cheerfully. "Kills every germ." The scent stung my throat. I coughed hard, a dry rasp echoing through the hall. Her smile grew wider. She thought I was fading, but I wasn't dying, I was documenting. 2 days earlier, Dylan had helped me install a small air filtration unit near my nightstand, the kind equipped with a VOC sensor that detects volatile organic compounds, invisible chemicals in the air. I made sure to record the readings every night before bed. The filter cartridges inside trapped whatever lingered in the room: vapors, solvents, traces of disinfectants. I didn't tell Aurora, of course. I just let her believe the machine was for dust. By the end of the week, I handed the used filter to Dylan during one of our quiet meetings. He sent it straight to Columbus Analytical Labs, labeling it Sample F Residential Air Capture Subject, Scarlett Donovan. We waited 4 tense days. When he called, his voice was steady, but edged with fury. "Scarlett," he said, "the analysis came back. The airborne chloroform concentration in your bedroom was 5.3 times the OSHA safety limit. That's enough to cause dizziness, confusion, mild blackouts, the exact symptoms Aurora's been trying to prove." I exhaled slowly. The data confirmed what instinct had whispered all along. Aurora wasn't poisoning my body. She was poisoning the air around me, crafting an illusion of decay, one breath at a time. That night I wrote in my journal, my handwriting firm, despite the tremor in my hands. She thinks she's writing the script of my decline. She doesn't know I'm writing the ending. Dylan arrived at my house earlier than usual that morning, his expression set and deliberate. He wasn't carrying his usual briefcase, but a thick manila folder stamped with the seal of the Ohio Attorney General's office. Inside were copies of every piece of evidence we had gathered: the lab reports, the surveillance photos of Aurora behind the hospital, the chemical analysis from the air filters, and the browser logs showing her searches on how to prove elder mental decline. It was no longer a private investigation. It was a criminal case in motion. That afternoon, Dylan drove to the Franklin County Sheriff's Department to meet Chief Laura Keene, a sharp, no-nonsense woman known for her precision with elder abuse prosecutions. When she reviewed the folder, she didn't interrupt or ask for clarification. She simply turned each page slowly, her jaw tightening with every photograph. "You've done half our work already," she said finally. "Now we make it official." Laura issued a temporary surveillance order, legal authorization for the department to install recording equipment on my property. The goal was not immediate arrest, but certainty. They needed Aurora to act on her own, to commit the act that would make her guilt undeniable. "You'll continue your routine," Laura said to me when she came by to inspect the layout of the house. "Same schedule, same meals, same behavior. Let her believe the plan is working. Predators relax when they think the prey has stopped fighting." Two detectives from her unit spent an afternoon installing miniature cameras in the kitchen light fixture, and a second one disguised near the back porch. They handled everything by protocol documenting serial numbers, timestamps, and the full chain of custody. Dylan signed as witness. I signed as property owner. Once the recording began, every frame would be admissible in court. For the next few days, I went on with my act. I coughed more often, stumbled slightly when I walked, and pretended to forget the day of the week. Aurora's tone shifted sweet with pity. One moment, sharp with superiority the next. She'd whisper to herself, while cleaning, "Soon the doctor will see how far gone she is." I let her believe every word. By Thursday evening, I overheard her phone call in the hallway. She thought I was asleep. "Tomorrow night," she whispered. "Once I set up the scene, everything will be ready. She won't even know what hit her." My pulse steadied, not from fear, but from focus. Tomorrow night would be the night she tried to stage her masterpiece, and the night it would all collapse. That evening, Dylan texted one line, "Stay calm, everything is set. Laura's team will move in on your signal." I stared at the glowing screen and closed my eyes. For months, Aurora had been choreographing a tragedy where I was supposed to fade quietly. But now the stage lights were hers, and the audience would be the law. It happened on the 5th night after the surveillance order was signed, the night Aurora believed she was performing her final act. The air outside was cold, the kind that sharpened every sound. From my bedroom window, I could see the yard bathed in half-light, the motion sensor quietly armed. I sat still in my chair, heart steady, the robe around my shoulders more armor than comfort. At 11:56 p.m., the cameras began recording. Through the silent lens, Aurora emerged from the back door, her movements quick and careful. She wore her pale blue scrub's hair tied neatly back, like a nurse preparing for duty. In her gloved hands, she carried a large black trash bag. Inside, a faint red glow blinked rhythmically, the same kind of device she'd used weeks earlier to fake the sound of a crying infant. She glanced around, once certain no one was watching, and crouched beside the bin. That was the moment everything shifted. The back floodlights blazed to life, slicing through the darkness like a stage spotlight. Aurora froze mid-motion, her hand still gripping the bag. From the far side of the yard, 3 figures stepped forward, deliberate, unhurried, in control. Chief Laura Keene led the way, her badge catching the light. Dylan followed beside her, his expression calm, the kind of calm that means victory. And then there was me, standing at the porch steps, wrapped in my thin robe, no longer pretending to be frail. For a second, the night was silent, except for the hum of the lights. Aurora blinked, confusion and panic wrestling across her face. She started to stammer, "What? What is this?" Chief Keene's voice cut clean through the air. "Mrs. Aurora Blake," she said clearly, holding up a folded document. "We have a court-issued emergency search warrant under Section 2913.49 of the Ohio Criminal Code, suspicion of intentional harm and endangerment of an elderly individual." Aurora's mouth fell open. Her eyes darted between Dylan, the police chief, and me. "This is insane. I don't know what you're talking about." Dylan stepped closer, his tone precise. "Everything you've done, every recording, every chemical purchase, every search on your computer has been documented, verified, and witnessed. You wanted to prove Scarlett Donovan was losing her mind. Instead, you proved your own intent." The police moved forward. One officer retrieving the trash bag, photographing it before sealing it in a clear evidence container. Inside the small recorder's red light still blinked, a perfect symbol of her own trap catching up with her. I didn't speak until she looked at me. Her face had drained of color. "You set me up," she whispered. I held her gaze, my voice steady. "No, Aurora. You set the stage. We just turned on the lights." The yard had fallen silent except for the soft hum of the floodlights. Aurora stood frozen near the trash bin as the officers approached, their boots crunching against the gravel. Chief Keen motioned for one of them to begin. "Document everything," she instructed. The officer pulled on protective gloves, switched on his body camera, and crouched beside the black plastic bag that Aurora had just placed down moments earlier. Every movement was methodical, precise, the way professionals handle something they know could decide the outcome of a case. The bag made a low crackle as it was unsealed. A sharp, sterile scent spilled into the air, the kind that never belonged outside a hospital. Inside, among layers of tissue and paper, gleamed a small glass bottle with a broken cap, its label still visible. Benzalkonium chloride solution. Half the liquid remained seeping slowly into a torn napkin. The officer lifted it carefully into a clear evidence container. Chemical disinfectant, medical grade, he confirmed, his voice recorded on the body cam. But that wasn't all. Beneath the bottle, partially hidden under coffee grounds, was a light blue medical mask streaked with dried blood, the same brand I used to keep in my bedroom drawer. My breath caught. I knew that print, that soft fabric edge. The mask was folded in a way that suggested someone had handled it roughly. Next to it, tangled in the bag's corner, lay a small syringe stripped of its label, an act that violated both OSHA regulations and the Medical Waste Disposal Act. The officer exchanged a glance with Chief Keen. "This isn't just contamination," he said. "This is tampering." Dylan stepped forward, holding a file he had prepared in advance. Inside were the certified toxicology reports and the earlier photographs Mark had taken Aurora in the hospital loading bay, exchanging an envelope with the supply clerk. He laid the documents on the police cruiser's hood beneath the floodlight. "This chemical," he said, evenly tapping the label on the broken bottle, "is the exact substance Aurora Blake withdrew from Columbus General Hospital 2 weeks ago under her staff access ID. We have the hospital's internal record and the time-stamped footage to prove it." Aurora's voice trembled. "That's ridiculous. It's just cleaning solution." Chief Keen didn't answer. She simply nodded to the evidence officer, who photographed each item, sealed them one by one into transparent containers, and printed adhesive tags with serial numbers. A second officer filled out the evidence chain report, every step, every handover, every timestamp carefully logged to preserve the legality of the seizure. As the items were carried to the patrol car, I stood still on the porch, watching the red glow of the recorder blink faintly through the plastic like a heartbeat fading out. For months, Aurora had tried to make me doubt what I saw. Tonight, the evidence itself was speaking louder than any words could. Aurora's voice cracked the moment the officers began sealing the evidence. "You don't understand," she cried, her tone pitching somewhere between hysteria and desperation. "I was just taking out the trash. She's the one losing her mind. She's been saying I'm poisoning her, that I'm spying on her. She's hallucinating." Her breath hitched as she turned to Chief Keen, eyes glossy with fake tears. "Please, you have to believe me. I love her like my own mother." No one moved. I stood near the porch railing, my hands trembling slightly, though not from weakness. I said nothing, not even when her voice cracked into a plea. The night air was cold against my skin, but my gaze stayed steady, calm, deliberate, unblinking. After everything she'd done, silence felt like the most powerful language I had left. Dylan finally stepped forward. His expression carved from stone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Chief," he said evenly, "I think it's time we show Ms. Blake something." From his briefcase, he pulled out a slim laptop, powered it on, and within seconds, the faint glow of the screen illuminated the night. The file name was short, but decisive. Footage 11:56 p.m. MP4. The camera's angle showed the backyard exactly as it was. Now the same fence, the same trash bin, even the same soft hum of cicadas in the distance. And there she was, Aurora Blake crouched down, unscrewing a bottle labeled benzalkonium chloride, the cap glinting briefly before she poured a thin stream into the open trash bag. Then, with clinical precision, she dropped a small black device inside. A faint red light blinked. The unmistakable wail of a baby crying echoed through the speakers. The moment hung in the air like a knife. Aurora's mouth fell open. That's not me," she stammered. "Someone edited that. It's a deep fake or something." Dylan turned the screen slightly so the police could see the timestamp at the corner, 11:56 p.m., synchronized with the surveillance system authorized by the court. He didn't even look at her when he spoke. This footage came directly from the hidden camera, installed under a lawful warrant with full chain of custody verification. It's authenticated, watermarked, and backed up on 3 separate servers. Would you like to deny it under oath? The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. Aurora's knees buckled slightly. Her voice dissolved into a small, broken sob. She looked at me, searching for pity that no longer existed. I met her eyes not with anger, but with something colder and older endurance. "Truth," I said quietly, "doesn't need to scream to be heard." Her face crumpled. The performance was over. Jacob arrived home earlier than expected, the tires of his car crunching against the gravel driveway, just as the flashing red and blue lights came into view. He froze for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, unsure if what he saw was real. 2 police cruisers parked in front of the house, their headlights slicing through the quiet night. The air felt heavier than usual, tense and electric. When he stepped out, he saw me standing in the yard beneath the floodlights wrapped in my robe, and several officers gathered near the trash bins. "Mom," he called softly, his voice uncertain. But before I could answer, another sound broke through the air, the cold, mechanical tone of an officer's voice reading, "Miranda writes, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Aurora was standing in the center of it all. Her wrists drawn behind her, the metallic click of handcuffs punctuating the silence. Her eyes were wild, face flushed with panic. "Jacob," she screamed, struggling against the officer's grip. "They're framing me. Your mother is lying. She's lost it, Jacob, please." Jacob took a hesitant step forward, confusion flickering across his face. Then he saw the sealed evidence bag resting on the police cruiser's hood, the black trash bag tagged and numbered with the broken chemical vial and the small recording device inside. One of the detectives held a tablet showing the video footage, Aurora pouring liquid from a hospital bottle, the red light of the recorder blinking. It was undeniable. Jacob's breath faltered. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. He looked between Aurora and me, his gaze trapped somewhere between disbelief and heartbreak. Dylan stepped beside him quietly, offering a manila folder. His tone was low but firm, leaving no room for comfort. "Mr. Donovan," he said, "this is the official investigative report. Lab results, surveillance footage, and the evidence log. She wasn't framed. She's been poisoning this home under your roof. You've loved her blindly, but now you need to see her with the truth, not with your feelings." Jacob took the folder with trembling hands, flipping through the pages as if each word drained the strength from his body. His knees buckled slightly. He lowered himself onto the curb, head bowed, eyes fixed on the ground. The night swallowed his silence. Aurora kept shouting, but her words no longer reached anyone. The officers led her toward the patrol car, her voice fading with every step. I didn't move. I only watched my son, my only child, sit there in the cold light, realizing at last how love can blind a man until the truth tears the veil away. Aurora was still screaming as the officers led her toward the patrol car, her wrists cuffed, her voice breaking against the cold night air. I didn't do anything wrong, she shouted, twisting her head as if one more plea could undo the truth. But when the red and blue light swept across her face, all that was left was a hollow reflection, the mask of a woman stripped of every lie she had built. The roar of the engine swallowed her words as the car pulled away, its lights fading into the distance until the yard fell silent again. Dylan closed his briefcase with quiet finality, his movements precise and restrained. "It's over," he said softly, but there was no triumph in his tone, only fatigue. The officers exchanged nods with him and began to pack up the equipment, methodically removing cables and cameras until the yard looked almost normal again. Almost. When the last cruiser turned off its headlights, the house was plunged back into the kind of silence that feels too loud. Jacob stood a few feet away, still frozen where he had been, when Aurora was taken. His hands hung limply at his sides, his lips parted like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. He looked smaller somehow, like a child who had stumbled into an adult's nightmare. "Mom," he stammered, his voice cracking. I didn't know. I didn't see any of it." I looked at him, not with anger, but with the calm of someone who had seen too much to waste energy on blame. "Now you know," I said quietly. "Now you know who you married." Jacob's eyes filled with tears. He nodded once, then looked away, shoulders shaking. Dylan placed a hand on my shoulder before leaving a silent gesture of respect and relief. When his car disappeared down the street, only Jacob and I remained under the pale porch light, surrounded by the faint echo of what had just happened. The night air smelled of rain and disinfectant, a cruel reminder of the chemicals that had once haunted this home. I drew in a deep breath, steady and slow. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then as the wind moved through the yard, I found my voice, not loud, but clear enough to fill the space between us. "A nurse who saves lives will be honored," I said, my tone even almost reflective. "But a nurse who harms will be dissected by justice itself." Jacob didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was already doing its work. As I turned back toward the house, I felt neither victory nor relief, only a quiet, solemn understanding. In all my years, I had tended to hundreds of patients, watched hearts restart, lungs fill with breath again. But tonight, I had saved one more life, my own, from cruelty wearing the face of family. The verdict came faster than anyone expected. The courtroom was silent when the judge read the sentence, "Aurora Blake, you are hereby convicted of intentional harm to an elderly individual and unlawful possession and use of restricted medical chemicals." The words echoed against the marble walls like the closing of a door that would never open again. Aurora stood pale and shaking, no longer the confident nurse who had strutted through hospital halls. Her hair hung limp, her eyes darted between the prosecutor and the defense table as if searching for someone to believe her. But the jury had already spoken unanimously guilty. The news spread through Columbus within hours. By the next morning, every local station carried the headline, "Nurse of deceit, hospital employee, convicted of poisoning her elderly mother-in-law." Her photograph, the same smiling headshot from the hospital staff directory, appeared beside the story, now a symbol of betrayal and hypocrisy. The hospital released a statement before noon announcing that Aurora Blake had been immediately terminated and that her nursing license was under review by the Ohio Board of Nursing. In truth, the board needed less than a week to revoke it permanently. Jacob sat through the trial every day, his face drawn and colorless. He tried to defend her at first, saying Aurora had been under stress, that it was all a misunderstanding. But each new piece of evidence dismantled his words. The lab reports, the footage, the medical records signed in her own handwriting. When the verdict was read, Jacob simply lowered his head into his hands. The man who once believed in reason and love now doubted everything, including himself. After the sentencing, I didn't speak to him. There was nothing left to say. A month later, I sold the old house, the one that had witnessed too much pain, and bought a small apartment across town. It wasn't grand, but it was mine alone. No shared kitchen, no hidden bottles, no ghosts. I changed my number and left no forwarding address. Jacob sent one letter asking for forgiveness, but I never answered. Some lessons I thought must be lived, not explained. Aurora served her sentence quietly, her name fading from headlines as new scandals replaced the old. When she was released, stripped of her license and reputation, no hospital would hire her, not even as a clerk. She moved out of state, trying to disappear from the shadow of her own choices. Meanwhile, I received an unexpected letter, an invitation to speak at the Elder Justice Awareness Week, hosted by the Ohio Attorney General's office. They wanted me to share my story not as a victim, but as proof of resilience and awareness. Standing at the podium facing rows of young medical workers, I said, "Justice doesn't shout. It waits quietly, patiently, until truth can stand on its own." And as I stepped down from the stage, I felt it not vengeance, but peace. The morning was quiet, wrapped in soft gold light that touched every corner of my porch. I stood by the railing, watering the flowers that had survived the long Ohio winter. The air was cool and clean, carrying that faint scent of wet soil and sunlight, the smell of starting over. The stream from the hose shimmered in the sun, scattering tiny drops that landed on my roses and petunias. I've spent most of my life tending to others, saving strangers in hospital rooms filled with fluorescent light. But these days I find more peace in caring for things that ask nothing from me, only water, patience, and time. When I finished, I turned off the hose and sat down on the wooden bench by the door. My old leather journal lay there, edges worn and pages full of memories I no longer feared to revisit. I opened to a blank page, let my pen hover for a moment, and wrote slowly, carefully. I have spent my life saving others, but perhaps this time I saved myself. The ink bled slightly into the paper. It felt right. For years I believed survival meant endurance, holding on no matter how much it hurt. But now I know it also means knowing when to let go. I let go of the house, the silence that used to frighten me, and even the son who needed to face truth without me shielding him anymore. A reporter once asked me outside the courthouse if I had any regrets. I remember smiling, calm and steady like the wind that morning. "No," I told her. "I only regret teaching her how to use a needle without teaching her how to be human." She blinked, unsure whether to write it down. I didn't say it for her, I said it for myself. I leaned back, looking at the flowers. They were blooming again, despite the frost, despite everything. Maybe we're not so different. My voice, quiet but sure, rose within me as if narrating my own story. Old age doesn't mean weakness. It simply means I've seen too much to be afraid anymore. I looked toward the open street, where the world carried on cars passing, a child's laughter, faintly echoing somewhere beyond the hedges. Life, ordinary and miraculous, was still moving. I smiled just a little, because I had survived not just the poison, but the kind that hides behind affection, the cruelty disguised as care. So if you're listening to me, wherever you are, remember this. If you've ever seen someone use kindness to hurt or twist love into control, don't stay silent. Tell your story. Because wherever truth is spoken, justice will find its way. And with that thought, I picked up my hose again, turned on the water, and let the garden breathe.